Hello and welcome. It's now 11:15, and I will move on and say a bit about the European Research Council and its current and next work program. My name is Anne Aagaard Jørgensen, and many of you probably know me. I've been working for a number of years as national contact point for the European Research Council. Today I will first use the time to say give a bit basic about the European Research Council and the work programs and how they're created and how they work. And I'll do it because it's quite good to have a bit of basic knowledge behind reading the work programs. I also want to add that this webinar is going to be recorded. So if you don't want your name in the chat, please don't use the chat. But afterwards, you can see the webinar on our YouTube channel. And first, I will give a presentation about the ERC and the work program, and then I will move on and give the word to senior researcher Bjarke Eltard Larsen at DTU, who got a starting grant in 2024, and he will share how he got his grant and the process about choosing to apply for ERC and writing the application and so on. You can ask questions in the chat, and you can also, if you want that, send me an email with your question. You can find my email address here. And if you have sort of a question that is sort of about your own case and quite sensitive, I really recommend that you send me an email. It's easier, I suppose, for all of us. Yeah. But I will use this opportunity to say a bit about the ERC, a bit of basics, which is good to have in hand and know before you apply for the ERC. Then I will say a bit about evaluation and panels, and then I will move on and give a bit of knowledge about the current work program. I'm fully aware that many of you know it quite well because it was released in the summer, in the 8th of July this year. So it's a very open and well-known work program, and we only have one callback this year. And I will say a bit about the ERC Plus grants, and I will also move on and say a bit about what we know about the next work program for ERC. And then also I will provide you with some useful links afterwards. The ERC was created in 2007 as part of the EU's 7th framework program for research and innovation. It was set up because a lot of researchers all over Europe and a lot of politicians from all over Europe, in particular from the Commission, saw a need for EU funding mechanism to support excellent and bottom-up research. At that time, the EU was only funding sort of more strategic research, but now there was quite a big demand to support bottom-up research and also basic research. DRC really fast became a huge success. It has produced some really significant research impact, and it's also a brand that is well known, and a brand that the European Commission takes great pride in. ERC is politically allowed. On the contrary, is led by a scientific council, which consists of 22 top researchers from all over Europe. So when you write an ERC application, you shouldn't take any political demands into account. You should only write which kind of research you really want to suggest for your project. ERC is supporting quite simple projects. You only need to be one principal investigators. There's no need for being several PIs in different countries. There's one project and one institution. You have to be very excellent, and you have to suggest an excellent project idea that goes beyond state of the art in your field, but probably also in neighboring fields. So you really have to be among the very top in your field to achieve an ERC grant. Projects are based on the researcher's very own ideas, so it's independent and bottom-up research. Projects are quite long. They're up to 5 years. Of course, you can apply for a shorter time span, but most researchers obviously choose to apply for 5 years. And then you have to suppose an excellent idea that can lead to a scientific breakthrough. And it's very important that the research you want to do is frontier research. It's also quite unique for the ERC that ERC grants are portable. When you apply, you have to apply from a host institution and they have to sign letters saying that will support you. But once you get the grant, you can move to another institution within the EU country. ERC's work programs are only 1 year long. We see often in Horizon Europe that work programs last for 2 years, but here they last for only 1 year. They're published every year in July, and all the main grants have one deadline per work program, and calls are open approximately 3 months before the deadline. ERC has 5 main grant schemes. They have a starting grant, consolidated grant, advanced grant, and a synergy grant, and proof of concept grant. And those grant schemes that have for many years, and we don't see any reason why they should change. Evaluation is also quite simple in ERC. Excellence is the sole criteria for evaluation, and excellence is in regard to both the project idea and the principal investigators' CV and so on, track record. For all ERC calls goes that there's a single step submission, but there's a 2-step evaluation. At step 1, the panel members read your section 1, the first part of the application. Then they will have a panel meeting and discuss it. And if you're lucky enough to get a score A, you will be moved on to step 2. And then the panel members will read the full application, both part 1 and part B2. And then there will be an interview. In most cases, the interview is online. And then you will be ranked. And if you're lucky enough to get an A, you could be chosen for funding. Before you apply for an ERC grant, you have to choose a panel to submit your application for. There are 28 panels in total, and they are divided into 3 scientific domains. The panels in the domain of life science, and panels in the domain of physical science and engineering, and panels in social science and humanities. Then I will move on and give you an overview of the news in the 2026 ERC work program. The ERC is very sort of stable, and we don't see many changes at all. So these changes I will give you an overview of now are quite sort of minor in some aspects, but sort of a change that is quite significant, even though it's not that large, is that the part B2 has been cut down, so it's now only 7 pages. Early on, for a number of years, we saw that the part B2 was 14 pages for the starting grant, consolidated grants, and advanced grants. And also the evaluation has changed sort of slightly. The scientific feasibility will no longer be assessed at step 1, but will only be assessed at step 2. So it should only be included in the part B2, whereas part B1 should sort of have be used to sort of present the research idea and also the research strategy. Also, another change to the work program was that the researchers currently based outside of Europe can apply for up to 2 million euros extra in additional funding if they are relocating to an EU country or country that is associated to the European Union. And this goes for the starting, consolidator, and advanced grant. And applicants already based in the EU country can request up to 1 million euros in additional funding. Earlier on, this additional funding was only to be used for a startup, to cover startup cost, to cover expenses for large field work, to cover expenses for large facilities and extra equipment and so on. But now this category has been quite open, and you can also use it to cover personnel cost if you can give a really good justification for that. So this is quite a big news for this work program. And I'm trying here to give an overview of the application and the differences between part B1 and B2. It's quite important to state that at the step 2, both part B1 and B2 will be read both by the panel members, but also by the remove with these. So you have to sort of make sure that there's no overlapping between the two parts, and they sort of can be read as a part of the sort of coherent narrative. As I mentioned beforehand, the part B1 should sort of give the overall idea, also sort of demonstrate that you know state of the art in your fields and neighboring fields, and present the scientific questions and objective of your project, and also sort of give a teaser of the overall approach, research, and strategy for your project. And then the part B2 should focus much more on the methodology and the implementation of the project, give an outline of the work plan, and also sort of give an overall assessment synopsis of the project and risk assessment and feasibility. Yeah, that's the main difference between the two parts, and also the target audience for the two parts are slightly different. The B2 will be read by panel members, and of course they are esteemed researchers, but they're perhaps not esteemed researchers in your field. So you have to write for a more sort of for a broader audience, whereas in part B2 you can write quite scientific specific, because you will be writing for people who are experts in your field of research. Yeah, another news for the work program is that there are now some new reason to get extension of your eligibility when you apply for an ERC grant, and if you want to expand the window you can apply for it. There are several reasons why you can do that. For instance, if you have had a child, or if you had some forms of leave, military service, long-term illness, and etc. You can read about it in the work program. But as a new feature, you can also get extension of your eligibility if you have had paternity leave, and this is sort of to give more equal rights for all kind of researchers. Also, if you have been a victim of gender-based or other forms of violence for a minimum of 90 days, and this has given you a gap in your research career, you can also apply for extension. And in all cases, you have to be able to document that this is why you have gaps in your CV as a researcher if you want this extension. And now move on and say a bit about the ERC Plus grants. As many of you know, there was a big sort of a political research conference at the Sorbonne University in 2025 this year in May, where President von der Leyen gave a big speech at the Choose Europe conference, and she promised that the Commission will sort of earmark a special fund to create some ERC super grants, as they were called at that time. And now we're starting to see sort of the outline of what this actually will look like. ERC has received a budget for the first round of 210 million euros. And for the first year, they will hand out a number of 13 grants for this ERC Plus grant, which they have been named. I think ERC thought that super grants was a bit too extravagant to name them, so they have been sort of more modest and calling them now ERC Plus grants. But even though it's quite important to keep in mind that ERC Plus grants are quite extraordinary, you have to go beyond what a normal ERC grant can achieve. And the competition is very fierce. You have to have the very best idea as a researcher, and you also have to be really among the very top of your field in order to stand a chance at this grant. Is going to be implemented as an amendment to the current work program. It should be published in December this year. So I'm looking out for this. It's going to be interested to see the amendment. And the call will open the 2nd of June next year, and the deadline will be the 2nd of September next year, as far as we know. The main feature will be that there's only one PI, so it's not going to be a synergy grant with 2 to 4 PIs, but only one PI. And each grant will be worth 7 million euros and last up to 7 years. The 7 million euros will be paid as a lump sum, and there's no way to get additional funding for this grant. Like the normal ERC grant, this grant will also be portable, so you can travel with it once you've had it. It's going to be open to researchers from all over the world, also Europe, of course. And like normal ERC grants, it's going to be bottom-up research. It's also going to be open for researchers at any stage of the career. So it's both going to be open for starting grant profiles, consolidated profiles, and advanced grant profiles, etc. You can only have one ERC plus grant in your career, and if you have an active grant, you cannot apply. And for now, we know that the scheme will run for 2 years. ERC is obviously hoping to get more funding so they can expand the scheme, and but for now, we don't know that. The application will be quite a lot like the normal ERC application. The only way that it differs is that there's going to be a statement of the vision for your project, and it's going to be between 1/2 to 2 pages long. And this statement of vision is going to be part of the template made for this call. The evaluation will also differ a bit from normal ERC grants evaluation. It will be 2 steps. The first step will be carried out by panel members from the advanced grant panel, and then the step 2 will be sort of will be more dynamic, and some sort of special ERC plus panels will be created for the occasion, and they will consist of sort of researchers who have been panel chairs for the normal ERC panels, but also sort of researchers who have sort of experience with leaderships in their fields and who are really visionary and can sort of look beyond state of the art in their field. So it's going to be sort of a more sort of what to say, more sort of broader panel with broader views. But excellence still remains the sole criteria for this evaluation. Then the next summer, 2026, we will see the next work program for ERC, the work program for 2027. And I still haven't seen the draft for that, but I know they are sort of working on it. And what we also know about this work program is that they will propose new and more flexible eligibility periods. Starting grants you can now apply from when you have a PhD that is between 0 to 10 years after your PhD defense. And for consolidated grants, you can apply from 5 to 15 years after your PhD defense, and this is quite new. Also, as a new feature, you can only receive one starting grant or consolidated grant in your research career. So you have to sort of think about which grants to apply for first. So this is a new thing for the next work program. And you can also only receive one, but you will be able to receive more than one advanced grant and one synergy grant in the career. Then I want to give a brief overview of the next ERC deadlines. The consolidated grant will be having a deadline in a month or once on one day. So I hope if you're working on that, I hope you will working on it quite severely. And then we know that the advanced grant deadline will be the end of August, and the starting grant will be mid-October, and synergy start November. We don't know exactly when, but we have heard that that should be the dates. And then we're expecting that the ERC Plus will be the 2nd of September. But all the sort of deadlines that are marked with a star will be announced in the next work program. Then I want to give some useful links. You can find the work program here, and I also want to draw attention to the line of ERC's webinar. They're really, really good and much more detailed than the webinar I'm doing now. And ERC has also created a string of videos which are really useful and sort of give a really basic introduction to how to write an ERC application and so on. And then I will pass on the word to Bjarke, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Yes. Thank you very much, Anne. I will then start sharing mine. Let's see here. And here, and I should just swap here. I hope everything is okay now. Well, thank you for inviting me for this. My name is Bjarke Eltad Larsen, and I'm a senior researcher at the Technical University of Denmark. And I'll tell you a bit about sort of my experiences from obtaining an ERC starting grant.
Bjarke, sorry, but we cannot see your slides.
Oh, You cannot see my slides.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying again.
Yeah, now we can see them.
Can you see them now?
Now it's perfect. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. So so I'll just tell you a bit about my experiences with obtaining an ERC starting grant. My project was called SHORE, so simulating coastal hydrodynamics and particle transport processes. And really, this has been something that I have been wanting to investigate for several years, and I have been investigated. And it really started when my professor back in 2012 said that predicting cross-shore sediment transport rates within a factor 2 can be considered a bullseye. And to me, that sounded like that's not really good. We must be able to do this better. So that has sort of been the focus. And over the years, I sort of accumulated more and more ideas and thoughts about how to do that, and that sort of then moved into me writing a lot of applications to do more research within this. So I was asked to talk a bit about timing. When should you apply, and what is the right candidate? And to be honest, I don't know exactly when, but I can see from D2, I was told that typically candidates have a PhD of, let's say, 5 to 7 years. And that's also me at the time of writing my proposal. I had a PhD of 5. And at the time, I had a position of senior researcher. And I think maybe that is also important. It's a permanent position. And I think this indicates that the university have decided that they are sort of rooting for you. You're worth giving a permanent position. I think that will give you some benefit when your CV is being evaluated. Additionally, I would say the ERC starting grant was by far not the only grant I'd written. I will show you a slide later. So I'd written several research proposals already. I tried to look a bit at my CV, what was my strengths and weaknesses, and I would say it's compared to what other ERC applicants might look like, and it's my perspective, I would say, and also information I got from DTU, and then I got some reviewer comments from my proposals, and they also had some comments from my CV, so I've sort of taken those in there. So one really big strength, I think, was that I had a past, I would say, major breakthrough in research. I had developed a new model, and this model has now been implemented in several open source codes and also commercial codes. And it's a highly cited paper as well. So this really show already that I have sort of a history of being able to make major breakthroughs, and that was also something that, let's say, the reviewers picked up on. I also think I have a rather strong international network, independent from my former supervisor, and I have had some awards, both reviewer awards, journal awards for good papers, and I didn't get a PhD best thesis, but I was sort of in the running there. One reviewer said I had very few awards, while others stated that I had many. So I don't know what the right number is. So some reviewers view this differently. I also think I was an experienced reviewer with a lot of reviews, and I was editorial board member in 2 journals. So that also sort of show already that you're sort of respected in the field since you're invited to become that. I had a lot of supervision experience and also a quite good track record with publications. Basically, based on what I heard from D2, I was more or less looking exactly like the average, let's say, recipient of an ERC grant, probably not the average applicant, but the average recipient. So I had 21 publications, most as first author, and quite a high number of citations for that. I would also say I was on par on a few. I'd say foreign research stay for 1 year. I would say many have, let's say, a larger degree of mobility, and I think that is something that they look positively on. And I'd been work package lead on several projects, but I also think that is probably the case for many applicants. Then regarding weaknesses, I had no PI experience. So even though I had written application, has been part of project, I've never been the main PI. Of course, this is a starting grant, so maybe that cannot be expected, but I think other applicants might have that experience. I also only had 2 publications without my former supervisor, so not that large degree of independence, and that was also something that some of the reviewers picked up on. And then I had only sort of co-supervised 1 PhD student, so again, not that experienced within this. Okay, so my other comment is that, well, writing a good application takes practice, and I think rejections, they're part of the game. So I just listed whatever applications I had done in the past. So you can see I really started actually doing my PhD. I obtained my PhD in 2018. But I already wrote my first proposal in 2017 because I knew I wanted to continue within research, and unfortunately that got funded, so I was up to a good start. But it also gave me a lot of experience in writing proposals. And you can see already 2 years after my PhD, I started applying for these early career grants. So I tried Separat a few times and I did not get funded, but it was actually the same idea as I ended up getting funded here in the end for the ERC. And as I've written here, I got 6 rejections on almost the same project idea before I got then funding from both ERC and Separat. And these 3 projects here I've just circled here were the only ones where I sort of got help from research support. I actually didn't know it existed really before that, that I could get help. So I reached out for the William Young Investigator, and the reason why I really applied for ERC starting grant was that, well, the one from research support sort of helping me with that said, I think your CV and idea will work really well for a ERC starting grant. So what is the right idea? As Anne just said, it needs to be groundbreaking and ambitious and have potential for large impact, but it should still be realistic and not just a continuation of, let's say, existing research. And that's sort of it's like a balance you need to walk. And I think I had one quote from one of the reviewers. I got 9 reviewers, and actually the 8 remaining reviewers were slightly more positive than this quote, but I like this. So it's highly likely that excellent research will result from the proposal, and that there's a potential for new and unique work to be carried out, although it's not likely that the objectives stated will be fulfilled. So this reviewer sort of liked me and some of my ideas, but didn't really believe that it could go the entire way. But I think it's nice that a few of the reviewers says like that, because then you are sort of on the edge of doing something that is ambitious and groundbreaking, but still also sort of also being realistic. I also think that many ideas might be groundbreaking is if you formulate it correctly. So I applied a few times, and it was actually just later in the project that I realized that what I have wanted to do was actually breaking from state of the art. I just never formulated like that. So for someone not knowing the field, they could perhaps not see that my idea was actually breaking from state of the art. So I think if you apply, or if you have a good idea, it is perhaps groundbreaking. You just have to sort of formulate it the correct way. Also, I think for a project to be realistic, you have to be an expert. And I would advise not going too far from existing research, because otherwise I don't think you can you can sort of convince anyone that you're an expert within the field. So I stayed very much within my past overall research area and methodologies, but I suggested to use this area and these methodologies that I knew quite well to improve slightly different models that I'd not worked with before, or reformulate, you could say. But this also meant that I really knew all the literature within the field already. So also, what is a good proposal? I just had this. So I have I call it 3 essentials. You need to have a hook. You need to know what and what not and how, and you need to know your target audience. The hook, that's also sort of how groundbreaking is this. You need to really demonstrate very clearly, this is groundbreaking, this is unique. And this was something my former PhD supervisor always told me when he gave feedback on my proposals. Bjarke, what is the hook? Another thing I think is extremely important is that you need to be clear on what you want to do. I had one collaborator from the project. He said, it looks really nice, but how is it really you want to do this? I cannot see it. How do you want to reformulate this model? And I have had a lot of, I've looked at a lot of other successful applications. Other researchers have been very kind to share their successful applications, not for ERC, but for Separat and other grants. And they are very, very different, but I would say it really screamed from the proposal that they knew exactly what they wanted to do. So I think if you find it difficult writing, it's probably because you do not know exactly what you want to do. So I think that's really, really important. Then again, target audience, as Anne also mentioned, some parts is read by experts, other parts are read only by the panel. So you really know how you write it such that it's understandable to anyone. Yes. So maybe it's a bit difficult to capture, but I have here what I would say my hook, but also what and how. and this was all described in the beginning of the applications. So one was that central assumptions, and you probably don't know all these, but they don't hold well. That was sort of one of the problems they had. And I suggest to break from these core underlying assumptions. Another very integral part of these models were they're based on what we call local parameters. And I want to break from that and use what I call integrated quantities. And then I had a third one, I will not go through that. And then even more important, why has this not been done before? People know maybe some of these assumptions are wrong. Well, it's actually only now with the recent breakthrough I described here on slide 1 that we can do it. Because it's only with this model that I developed that I will be able to break from the state of the art. And that sort of also showed that I was probably the right person to do this. Yeah. So writing the ERC application. So my application was based on, let's say, many reformulation of past applications. So it started with the separate, and I sort of rewrote time and time again. I don't know how long time it actually took. I had to remember back, but I think my first application took almost 1 month full time. And I would say other research projects suffered a bit. And I have written here, I did not work more just because I wrote applications. So I sort of saw it as part of my job as a researcher to also write applications. And I would say I knew state of the art. So if I had gone further from my existing research area, I think much more time would have been spent just for reading and catching up in the field. Then each rewriting took maybe 2 weeks, I think. And the ERC application alone took slightly longer, spread out sort of rather intensively over 2 months. But again, I think I knew exactly what I wanted to do because I tried to formulate it so many times. So it was not that difficult to write, I think. Otherwise, I think it's important that you get feedback from many sources. And so don't be afraid to share your idea. I got it from my former supervisor, project collaborators, but I also sent it to other colleagues at other universities and also research support. And even my wife, well, she's also a researcher, but it's just nice to get a lot of different perspectives. And I was not so afraid that anyone would sort of steal my idea. I think it's better to get, because they have very different points of views. Yeah. So I was also helped by a research support at DTU. We had sort of a essential research support, and they started with a startup information meeting. And what that really gave me was, yes, writing an ERC application is comprehensive, but it's actually not as bad as I thought. They gave some very nice guidelines and templates for CV and track record. So that really helped me, I think, in terms of what to emphasize. And then they gave, when I came for that, they gave some information meetings about the interviews. And there were experiences from past recipients similar to me, and that was really, really helpful. Then I also had a personal contact, just one person from research support. And we've had a lot of email correspondence on, let's say, smaller issues. I just went through my mailbox. I think we have like 100 plus emails, though a lot of them are just very small comments. But it just helped me. She could sort of provide me with answers to a lot of smaller issues. So what should include in the overhead, financing of PhDs, how are the rules, etc., etc. Very importantly, she gave me feedback on my full application 3 times, and she helped me also with the interview in setting up mock interviews and also feedback on my presentation. I was also asked to tell you a bit about the online interview. So I'd say prepare. It takes a long time to prepare properly. And I spent a long time and perhaps even more mental energy on this. So now I got to the stage where I was invited for interviews for actually both Sapaude and ERC, and they came within 1 week of each other. So I was like, okay, this can really change my career. This can change everything. So I really had difficulties focusing on anything else. But I needed to prepare very well. And you should really sort of know everything. You have like, it differs from panel to panel, but I had like 5 minutes to present everything. So you really need to know it by heart. I also practiced a lot looking into the webcam because it was an online interview. So I did a lot of recordings of myself talking during the presentation, and then I could look through it and see, do I look into the camera? Do I speak properly? How is this really going? So that also worked quite well. I had some mock interviews. We also did those online, and that was both with past recipients of ERC grants at our university, but also from other universities who were sort of field experts. I also had some colleagues, again, actually not part of the project, read my applications, and I asked them come up with the most difficult questions you can imagine for this project and write them down. And I then practiced, you could say, short answers to any of these difficult questions. Among difficult questions, I also had myself. Other thoughts I had sort of leading up to the interview was that I think the panel should feel my passion for the subject, and that I'm really the expert. So I should not be afraid to hold my ground if they start challenging me. But also sometimes I think it's okay to also say that some things is outside the scope of your project if it truly is. So I actually had that in the project. They were saying, but you're neglecting all these things. Is this not important? I said, yes, it is very important, but that is sort of outside the scope. It will be next step. That's my next ERC grant where we'll cover that. We cannot do that yet. We need to do the other thing first. So how it actually went, I think it was a nice setup. It was sort of the camera, they were in a big room and the camera always focused on the one talking, and it really felt like a real conversation. You may not know this, but you get a reviewer comments and you don't know them before the interview. So you don't know how the reviewers thought of your project. Of course, they are generally positive, otherwise you wouldn't have been invited for the interview. But it's a bit stressful that you don't know them. And I would say the panel did go at me with, let's say, hard questions from the reviewers also. I could see that some of the questions I got I could directly see those in the reviewer comments. So I have some examples down here. So it is sort of, they try to challenge you. If you have been to a separate interview, it's slightly different where it's much more, I would say, a pleasant conversation where they don't go at you that hard. So then I got the grant, and that's excellent. But then comes the grant agreement, and I would say that is exhausting and intimidating. There's a lot of important documents, but to be honest, you don't know and understand everything that's in them. I got also support from other part of research support here at DTU. But also then once you get started, it was my first time as PI, and there's so much you don't know. The finances, who does what? Where can I see the status of my project? How much freedom do I have? How do I go about hiring people? So it is really challenging, and it's sort of a new world. And even though I have a lot of hours on the project, I have to get used to. There's a lot of other things I have to do now as a PI, so I don't have the same time as I was used to when I was just working on other people's projects. So that was a bit on, you could say, my experiences with writing an ERC application and and getting the grant. So if you have any questions, I will also be happy to answer them. And I'll stop sharing. Yeah.
It looks like there's no questions. It must be really, because it's really clear and well-spoken presentation. Thanks a lot for that, Bjarke. I thought it was really useful. Nice to have a good wife for that occasion. Yeah, and I also received a few questions on email, but if you have further questions for me, then just send me an email. And then I want to say thanks a lot for your time, Bjarke. It was really useful. It's always good to hear from a researcher how the process has been, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hear about your results in a year or two. And also, yeah, for the audience, thanks for taking the time to learn about the recent trends in the ERC grants and work program. And yeah, if you have further questions, then feel free to ring me or send me an email. Thank you.